And let's keep going. Now, let's think about this. In the beginning, matter came into being. Christians call it creation. It's also known as the Big Bang. We say as Christians we say God brought matter into being. That is our universe, the stars, planets. As the Bible states, God made man, women, animals, birds, fish, beasts. God actually says, God mankind, he made mankind after his own likeness and being. Now that's important. God made mankind, that's you or me, after his likeness and being. Now exactly how God accomplished that, of course, is a lot of conjecture, isn't there? But that's life, isn't it? But there's a lot of movement. If you say God created everything, there is a lot of movement, and you can actually try to work out what God actually did. Some theories are clearly incorrect, but some of them could be pretty close. What we do know is that we have a God who is active in history, today and tomorrow. That's fairly not difficult to believe, is it? What is difficult to believe is that God always existed. That's difficult. And the fact that God in fact lives forever, will never die, and that we as Christians will live forever is also hard to believe. But the one thing I just want to say is what's important is the fact that we are made after God's image and likeness. God has put values into us as human beings. He's put them inside of us. So as human beings, it doesn't matter who we are, it doesn't matter which culture we are, whether it be the Islamic world, whether it be the Western world, whether it be in the Chinese culture, the Indian culture, it doesn't matter where you are, there is something in a human being, these are universal values. And what happens, of course, is we have the universal values that are in every person, but then we have the cultural input, where on top of the universal values, then the cultural goes on top. And quite often, the culture supports the universal values, but sometimes the universal values are destroyed by the culture. Now, it's true to say most people want to have a good life, don't they? They really do. But unfortunately, there are groups in a culture who try to lord over people. We see that in the world today. We look at places like Mexico with the drug barons and their workers. Africa will see the government headed by a person who are keeping people into poverty. Then we have North Korea, where the government and the military are keeping people well and truly under the thumb, if you like. Then we have groups in Iraq and in Afghanistan that basically are just trying to dominate in the country and to stop people from having a good life. Now, probably one of the reasons some of these groups actually become dominant, or not dominant, but they really get their way, is the fact that they get people to be so afraid. Like I saw an article there where a project in Afghanistan was being done, but they could not use the locals in Afghanistan because the Taliban would probably kill them, so they had to get the workers from somewhere else. So that's using fear. But some groups are really good at that. In other words, they can keep their people, their citizens in place by using force, violence, killing through the government and the military particularly. But America's had its own run, didn't it? When it went to Vietnam and 40,000 people died. Then we have Australia supporting invasion of Iraq and that, and Afghanistan. You know, these are all areas where we are caught up in a cultural area where we are supporting on top of the universal values, where the universal values say things we should care after each other, we should not kill anybody, we should treat other people, we should treat people like we want to be treated. All these normal values are there, but the culture is such that we move into another area. And we justify what we're doing as well. And as we discussed, the universal conscience is in every person. There is no exceptions. Now, Muhammad is a very good example. He brought the Quran insights, and Islam was developed. Then we have Abraham. Now, Abraham, in fact, was the first Muslim. Now, God's Abraham, if you like, Abraham's God is my God. Abraham's God is the Islam God. The Jews' Abraham's God is the Jews' God. So we are all the same God, starting with Abraham. But of course, as history came, some of us gone in different directions, haven't we? Sometimes in the Quran, of course, or not in the Quran, but groups have gotten up in the Islamic world who claim to be serving a God, but then they go around and they actually go ahead and support suicide bombers, killing people, and children are killed, anybody's killed. That certainly moves away from the human values that God has given us. Now, what I'm going to do is only do two things, two examples about those universal laws. So you have the universal laws, which exist with everybody. Then you have the cultural situation, where the culture is placed on top of the universal laws. Sometimes the culture supports the universal, but sometimes the culture does not support the universal laws. And two big things is God says people should treat others as themselves want to be treated. And God also says, do not kill. And I'm sure you do not want people to kill you. So really, groups are getting the upper hand where they're forcing people to do things which really most people do not want to see happen. But the groups are dominant. Through power, the political situation in government and the military, they are forcing people to do things that most people do not really want to do. And the reason they don't want to do it is because nearly all people on the planet, there are over 6 billion people in the world, nearly every single 6 billion want to have a good life. Some people are having a good life, but some people are not. All because some groups are able to, in their cultures, they are able to get the upper hand and really destroy the universal values that really are good for people. The universal values are good for people. That's where we are, isn't it? But in spite of that, it doesn't matter what happens in the world today, it doesn't matter what happens, one day there will be a day when there will be a recompense. People will come before God and they will have to give an account for their lives. So, if for some reason, sometimes the universal laws are destroyed and the culture becomes dominant and actually does the wrong thing, like suicide bombers, there's no way in the world that suicide bombers is acceptable to the living God of Abraham. There's no question about that at all. Anyway, think about that. There are the God of Abraham, my God, your God. There are cultures, universal laws, and in the end, the right thing will happen and people will give an account before God according to what they did.